Hi everyone, Jamie Chapman for another episode of 3-Minute Histology. In this video, we're going to be continuing our look at epithelial tissue, and in particular, this video is going to be focusing on stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. Now, this is a specialized type of epithelium which we find on the outer surface of our bodies, which is of course known as the epidermis or part of our skin. So we're going to have a look at that in the next 3 minutes. So let's start our timer. Okay, so as I mentioned, stratified squamous keratinized epithelium is a specialized type of epithelium. Stratified means it's more than one cell layer thick, so not all of the cells actually sit on the basement membrane, only the basal cells sit on the basement membrane. Squamous means that the surface cells become flattened like scales on the surface, and keratinized means that there's a layer or more, several layers of this epithelium in which the cells actually undergo cell death. They fill with a protein called keratin, and there's no nuclei present in those dead cell layers. As I say, the example of this type of epithelium is actually skin, in particular the epidermis of the skin. So that's what we're looking at here. This is a section of thin skin. This brown pigment which you can see here, this is melanin. So melanocytes produce melanin and pass it on to these cell types. So the cell types which make up the stratified squamous keratinized epithelium are known as keratinocytes. So they begin as these basal cells. They undergo mitosis. One of those cells moves up into the next layer, and then eventually they migrate their way to the surface, eventually accumulating these granules which eventually fuse together at cell death to form these dead cell layers. You can see there's no nuclei present here. Once the cells are in this layer here, which is known as the stratum granulosum of the epidermis, they actually undergo cell death. All the organelles break down, the nucleus breaks down, and so these layers are actually basically cell membranes filled with that protein keratin that eventually gets shed on the surface here. And this is just a little glancing section through a hair follicle. Now this is better shown in this lovely resolve section of a resin section. We can actually see this sort of transition from these different layers, and this is actually a section of thick skin, and the reason we can tell it's thick skin is because it's got this very, very thick dead cell layer. The other reason is we've got these undulations. These are actually the dermatoglyphs or fingerprints, which are classically found on the palms, which is the side of our thick skin. But if we zoom in here, again, we can see a layer of basal cells. So this is the layer called the strata basal. The cells move up here. They become very spiky because they've got lots of desmosome junctions here holding the cells together, preventing their separation, because this is about abrasion. And instead of being in a moist environment like in a non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, it's a dry environment. We're exposed to a dry environment externally. So we have these extra levels of protection for our epidermis. The cells become flattened, they accumulate these granules, they undergo cell death. You can see sort of the breakdown, the nuclei breaking down here, and then no longer do we have any nuclei present in these outer layers. So these are actually all dead cells, dead keratinocytes, where they're actually known as corneocytes when they're dead cells on the outside. So that was a quick overview of stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. As I say, found only in the epidermis in the human body, and very characteristic of that cell death. The cells accumulate that keratin on the surface, which eventually shed from the surface and provide a nice protective layer for our underlying tissues. Hopefully you found that useful. Stay tuned for other videos in our epithelial tissues series, and we'll see you in the next video. Hooroo!